With a bachelor's degree in physiotherapy and a master's and PhD in health sciences, she is the academic leader for teaching and learning at her university. She has been one of the 2 South African delegates selected by the National Research Foundation for the Hope Meeting with Nobel laureates held in Japan in 2019. At the same time, she is a dedicated researcher and writer focusing on HIV and stigma. Today, she will be sharing with us on social stigma in South Africa, living with children diagnosed with HIV. So let's welcome Prof. Chetty to give her talk. Just to let you know that she has had very bad or intermittent internet connection in South Africa due to storms. And she has sent us a pre-recorded lecture, and she would be available during the forum. If you have any questions, she will be glad to answer them during that time. All right, so let's listen to her talk.
Good day to the chair, facilitator, and attendees. I am Verusia Chetty, an associate professor in the School of Health Sciences at the University of Kwazulu-Natal. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me as one of the guest speakers for their online webinar series marking World AIDS Day 2020 with Taylor's University in the era of COVID-19. I would like to contextualize my birthplace, South Africa, then discuss the extent of the HIV epidemic in South Africa, the stigma around HIV in our country, and the work we are involved in. Thereafter, I would like to share my experience with you on HIV and stigma, the stigma that is debilitating healthcare for children living with HIV. South Africa is on the tip of the African continent. The population in South Africa is approximately 59 million. South Africa is a multi-ethnic society encompassing a wide variety of cultures, languages, and religions. Its pluralistic makeup is reflected in the Constitution's recognition of 11 official languages. 80% of the population are of Black African descent, and the remaining population consists of Africa's largest communities of European, Asian, and multiracial ancestry. There are 9 provinces in South Africa, and I hail from KwaZulu-Natal. It is on the east coast of South Africa and boasts diversity and richness of different cultures. Yes, South Africa is beautiful, but the major catastrophe that led to a crippled healthcare system was the era of apartheid. Apartheid led to the segregation of the different ethnic groups into a system of oppression and societal degradation. Black South Africans were used as laborers and offered the worst living conditions, education, and resources. The then apartheid government had areas for work, socializing, and even public spaces that were designated for white-only and black-only residents. Bringing me to my point of healthcare. Sadly, Black South Africans received healthcare in public facilities that further had designated areas for their care, secondary to white South Africans who had private and preferred healthcare and resources. Decades later, the ripple effect of apartheid is still evident, and the majority of Black South Africans are the poorest and are still seeking care from under-resourced public facilities. This I lifted off the invitation for this webinar series. Globally, an estimated 38 million people were living with HIV at the end of 2019. Due to gaps in HIV services, 690,000 people died from HIV-related causes in 2019, and 1.7 million people were newly infected. WHO 2020. To place South Africa in context of these, 7.7 million people with HIV are from South Africa alone. So our country faces the biggest HIV epidemic in the world. By 2019, up to 3.6 million South Africans died to HIV. HIV prevalence among the general population is now as high as 20.4%. The prevalence is even higher among women and adolescents. South Africa has made huge improvements in getting people to test for HIV in recent years. It has now met the first of the 90-90-90 targets, with 90% of people living with HIV being aware of their status at the end of 2018. The country has the world's largest antiretroviral therapy program. South Africa was the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to fully approve PrEP, which is now being made available to people at high risk of infection. Kwazulu-Natal, my province, has the highest number of people living with HIV in South Africa. This is where a lot of our work is conducted. Our work is focused on HIV, strengthening healthcare systems, the disabling effects of HIV, and the treatment, as well as rehabilitation. I work with a team of dynamic academics, researchers, and healthcare workers. We are based at the University of Kwazulu-Natal, but also work with other universities and leaders in South Africa. We have contributed models of healthcare for children living with HIV, as well as adults. We have conducted randomized controlled trials using home-based care for people living with HIV, and we have also contributed to policy that guides HIV care in South Africa and globally. The time we spent in the field actually made us overtly aware of the issues around stigma. Initially, the team and I were enthusiastically accruing evidence-based findings for healthcare system strengthening and ignored a huge burden, a burden that has impeded our research efforts on every level. This HIV-related stigma was hindering us on so many levels, including individuals, their families, communities, and systems. I would like to read a small excerpt of a book I recently contributed to on some of my experience in the field conducting my research, to highlight the reality of the effect of stigma on our work that absolutely cannot be ignored. Pseudonyms have been adopted. These are two real-life scenarios that changed my paradigmatic view and forced me to address stigma in my research area. My eyes welled up with tears as I listened to my dear Chetty tell me about the photos lying on her mahogany coffee table. We have been friends for many years, and I knew there was pain in her eyes. But why did I not ask? Now I sat there watching my friend break down and tell me about her baby boy. Tommy was only 9 years old. He overheard Chetty telling his granny that she was HIV positive. He had heard his granny cry like she just found out Chetty was going to die. Tommy didn't understand this HIV. He was scared. He didn't even talk to Chetty about his fear. He went to school pretending that he didn't know that his mum was infected. He became quieter and quieter as days passed by. He heard his classmates talk about other community members who were infected with HIV and how they were ill-treated by friends and family. And he also heard them say that all those people with HIV were going to die. One day, Tommy came home from school and told Debbie that she was going to die and that he knew she had the virus. He told Debbie that he was scared, that people wouldn't visit them, they wouldn't like him anymore, and they were going to be alone because this thing had got them. Debbie loved her boy. He was all she had. She explained that she held him close and told him that she really didn't understand this HIV and that she was also scared. A few days later, my friend walked into her home to see that her baby boy had killed himself. He couldn't bear the thought of being stigmatized. He couldn't handle the things people were saying about HIV as if it was a demon. He was gone and Trebi was alone. I sobbed as I held my friend who is now an advocate for HIV and stigma, my friend who went through so much pain and has dealt with the heartbreak. However, now I saw in her eyes a survivor. Trebi is a hero, and I wish she had known all she knows now before she lost her baby boy. Another young woman I met through some work I am doing on HIV in children in a community in Kwazulu-Natal, South Africa, shared her story on HIV-related stigma. Sasha was only 13 years old when her boyfriend insisted they have sex. She loved him so much and thought that she could never feel the same way about anyone ever again. She believed that this was her Prince Charming and they would surely get married and have a family when they were older. Once Sasha agreed to be intimate with him and had sex, he broke up with her and moved on to her best friend. Sasha didn't know that her beloved boyfriend had been intimate with a few other young ladies in the community and had been infected with HIV. A few months later, she found out that she was pregnant and also had been infected with the virus. She thought it was the end of the world and that she didn't deserve love or life. She thought about ending her life because of the shame and embarrassment for her family. She felt like there was no hope because of what people would say and how they would treat her because of the virus. The HIV-related stigma scared her more than the virus itself. Luckily for Sasha, her mum, who was a nurse at the local clinic, quickly realized the trauma her daughter was going through as she watched her fall prey to depression. She took her to a psychologist who got to the bottom of her emotions and helped her to deal with the issues around the HIV-related stigma. Her mum also got her to a HIV counselor who told her that both she and the baby would be well. The counselor helped her to understand the importance of antiretroviral therapy and taking care of her health. The great news is that I met Sasha at the age of 20 with her beautiful baby boy. They are both very well and on antiretroviral treatment. She has joined our team who are helping other young people to deal with HIV. Sasha did explain during one of our sessions with young people that her boyfriend did not support her at all. He refused to get tested and was still intimate with other young ladies. She often shares that she wishes that she had known he didn't really love her. She would have waited. She wishes she had known his HIV status. She doesn't regret having a baby boy, but she does remember the pain she felt because of the lack of support from her ex-boyfriend. Sasha has grown up and matured and has just met a young man who wants to pursue a relationship with her. She let him know that she has HIV, and thankfully he understands that they can have a fulfilled and intimate relationship, and that HIV is not the end of their new relationship. Sasha's future looks bright, and she has equipped herself with the knowledge that is giving her a bright outlook on life and a great future. I have also co-authored 3 books on HIV and stigma for children aged between 6 to 12, and those books address facts about HIV and its spread and demystifies the myths around the virus. Stigma among children in South Africa. HIV-related stigma is a worldwide issue. Its propagation varies in magnitude across countries and sometimes within countries. This stigma impedes HIV prevention efforts. Due to ignorance about the disease in sub-Saharan Africa, people living with HIV are often stigmatized and as a result experience dire consequences. In South Africa, women and adolescent girls are predominantly infected by HIV. The myths and stigma associated to HIV often result in women, adolescents, and children to live in constant fear. They are marginalized and often believed to have been spiritually cursed in some beliefs or promiscuous in other communities. They often fall victim to violence and hate speech. From our experience and evidence on HIV-related stigma, marginalization leads to children and youth living with HIV to hide their status from family and friends, and leads to a reduction in health-seeking behavior that can improve upon their quality of life or prevent future transmissions. Approximately 50% of all new HIV infections occur with children and adolescents. Adherence in children and adolescents to ARTs is essential for them to live a long life, but has been evidenced to be poor. In a few studies conducted in South Africa on HIV and adherence to antiretroviral therapy, HIV-related stigma and disclosure were factors that hindered adherence to this crucial treatment. A large quantitative study in 2020 shed light on the multiple types of discrimination and internalized stigma experienced by young people living with HIV, and added to the growing body of evidence that positions HIV-related stigma as a serious threat to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on Health, SDG 3. From a sample of over 1,000 young people, almost a third experienced discrimination in the preceding year. Researchers, who we incidentally collaborate with, found that different forms of discrimination heighten internalized stigma and compromised retention in care among adolescents living with HIV. More intervention research is urgently needed to better understand how to eliminate HIV-related stigma and interrupt pathways of risk from discrimination to internalized stigma and non-retention in care. The stigma associated with HIV seriously impacts children in South Africa, socially, economically, and mentally. Prevention efforts cannot be as successful without addressing the issue of stigma among this group. Commitment and collaboration from the government, healthcare professionals, public health officials, and civil society is imperative to stem the issues of HIV-related stigma in our country. We need to work together to create an environment where children feel loved, and safe enough to disclose their HIV status and participate in prevention efforts. Global solidarity, shared responsibility is the theme for World AIDS Day 2020. I would like to open up our network and our research context and welcome you to partner with us in addressing the gaps in our healthcare and specifically HIV-related stigma amongst children living with HIV. My details are available to the organizers, and I am happy for them to share that with you. Thank you.